Oh, hi. So, we had a major ARPG launch this past weekend before I'm recording this show, and had a lot of, let's say, usual things that we've come, to maybe expect as just as part of the ARPG experience. But we'll talk about that a little bit as we go through and go and catch up on the last couple of weeks worth of Diablo news, because we've got actually a fair decent amount to go through and chat about. Of course, one of the biggest things that we have in the development is we now have the end date for season 19 and a kind of a guesstimate for when season 20 is going to go through and start. And for that, wait for it to load there. There we go. You can go through and see, originally, last week on Friday, they went through and posted season 19 ends next week, but then they quickly went through and corrected it, that it actually, in fact, will be ending on Sunday, March 1st. So a little bit of the mix-up on the dates there. But yeah, so that's actually going to go through and put it at very close to the originally quoted 3 months that they're trying to stick to for the development of these seasons. Now, we still have the PTR that's going on right now. So it's like one of those ones where it's like, seems to be, at least it's longer than the 1 week PTRs that they were doing in the past. And they haven't really given us an official end date for the PTR yet, at least that I'm aware of. Though it could very well be going through and ending this week. As they go through and want to try and wrap up the final things in order to get it ready for the season, the whole patch 2.6.8 push. But I'm hoping that we will be getting at least a couple more updates, if not actually going through and being put to the PTR server itself. That's something that we've seen in the past where they've implemented updates, and then they've implemented updates after the PTR ends, and so we don't actually get them till the season patch, and cause some some interesting little thoughts, some little conundrums, especially like say with like the Valor set, whereas all of a sudden it was just, even though they did do a second PTR iteration for that one, where it's just all of a sudden, oh yeah, it's Fist of the Heavens, now it's a Heaven's Fury build, congratulations, go have fun. That I don't think that will have anything quite that big, for the 3 class sets that we have now, but the barbarian and the wizards, the barbarian and the wizard sets are, at least they're struggling a little bit on the PTR in terms of overall performance. But at least we can hope that there'll be some further changes and some iterations that happen with those items, in those sets, that will help bring them back up. But as I was saying, we kind of, because that season 19 is going to be ending on March 1st, they have said that at least they want to try and go to more of a 2-week break in between the wrapping up of season and the start of the next one. It gives them time to go through, implement the patch, do the seasonal to non-seasonal database mergers and a whole bunch of other stuff on the back end. And having that 2-week breather is a lot more beneficial for them. And I think it's something that the community themselves have also just been wanting a little bit more as well. So that way there's a lot of activity, at the beginning of the season, things drop off, and then the activity goes back up at the end of the season. And so you're kind of like hitting these 2 big active points, within the same week, that it might cause a little bit of a early burnout. Or, I just was going through and doing all this. I dedicated my whole weekend to playing Diablo, and then now I'm going into the next one, and now I'm like staying up for 24 hours straight or something like that for the season opener, just so I can, get top conquests or get everything done for the seasonal journey in, tall order. But, maybe they might go longer, depending upon some of the changes that they might implement after they get all of the data from the PTR set up. We're not quite sure, because they have yet to go through and give us when season 20 itself will start. But I wouldn't expect it anything earlier than Friday, March 13th. It would probably be my guesstimate as to when season 20 itself will start. That probably means that we'll get the patch not on Tuesday the 3rd, but probably closer to like Tuesday the 10th. Just so that way they can launch, get some again, it's just breathing room for everything that they have to do on the back end between merging the season and the non-seasons. But yeah, like I was going through and saying, there are some still some issues going on in the PTR itself. Now, the Witch Doctor set is absolutely amazing, is changing up not just the actual Witch Doctor meta, but also the group meta as well. You have probably one of the most powerful sets that they've released, not counting the Valor set for the Crusaders. It's not that powerful, but you're talking about something that can easily do like 2-minute T16 riffs. You're talking something that could do is one of the best trash clears in the game, especially now that the Bazooka Wizard has been nerfed into unplayability. It's just going to be an amazing replacement for rat runs as well. So it is with one caveat that despite all the performance that the Witch Doctor can do, it is in this particular patch going to be overshadowed by the Necromancer because of the Season 20 bonus, where the seasonal theme allows you to have the fully unlocked Kanai's Cube, so you can equip, three weapons or 3 rings or something like that. Just because there's so much power in certain Necromancer items of being able to stack certain weapon or jewelry combinations, it gives them the advantage in almost everything where they were starting to fall behind in previous seasons. That the Necromancer probably will still... Rat runs will kind of be supreme. In Necromancer will also have like really good Rift Guardian killing capabilities and decent trash clearing for this particular season from what they've been finding on the PTR. Things, of course, it's limited testing, and as we've seen in a lot of other seasons, there are things that change halfway through as people actually get in there and figure stuff out, or they keep something, they play their cards, close to their chest in the PTR and don't release a lot of data, and then they go through and find, well, there's a super overpowered build, and we're actually going to be like, speed running 140s or something along those lines as we go through and get like a week into the season. So there is that. The Witch Doctor set, at least that what we see, is really nice, really good. Offers some things to go through, change up, take the place of the Wizard in the long run. It will have some competition specifically for the Season 20 seasonal theme, but once we leave that, it will kind of like go through and take its place, barring anything that might change going into Season 21 in the final remaining Demon Hunter and Necromancer sets. But when we get into the Barbarian and the Wizard sets that also are coming with Season 20 in patch 2.6.8, it's not quite as good. Just like the Barbarian, it's a little bit squishier compared to some of the other top-end Barbarian builds, and it's just not quite as good as what is currently at the top. And even though it might have had some potential as like a alternative Rift Guardian killer, the way that the 2-piece set bonus works makes it just kind of like improbable for that particular role. For those that might not know, let me go through and just pull it up here real quick. The way that the Barbarian set works is that it's all about frenzy. The 4-piece set bonus gives you damage reduction, which they actually just increased from 5% to 6%, which is actually about a 20% increase in their survivability. And then the 6-piece set bonus increases the damage of frenzy by 1,000% for every stack of frenzy that you have. Then when you combine that with some of the other items, you can get up to the 10 stacks. Also starts attacking once per stack to get some really massive damage out there. The big thing that actually pushes it into viable numbers is the 2-piece set bonus, which doubles all of its damage to feared, and then now recently with the most recent PTR patch, frozen enemies. Which sounds great when you're going through and maybe, say, doing speeds, but it's not quite as fast as, say, like your typical Whirlwind build if you're going through and trying to do speeds, or like solo Torment 16 runs. And then when you're trying to do it as like a high-end Rift Guardian killer, you run into the issue that both Fear and Frozen are hard CCs, which they share the same kind of like internal crowd control immunity cooldown. So eventually, after you freeze, the enemy a certain number of times, they'll become immune for a short period of time. Uh, and not only that, but what is it? The barbarian, one of the frenzy runes actually stuns the mob, which then also shares that same immunity window with fear and frozen. So your actual skill isn't freezing them, it's stunning them, which doesn't give you double damage, and you're having to go through and try and do either a shout, or someone to come in and have a freeze effect, so that way you can do double damage. All the while, you can't stop yourself from actually stunning them and closing in, that CC immunity, and then having your damage for, portions of that Rift Guardian kill. If they opened it up to say, like, if they were slowed, or maybe even something along the lines of Crisbin, where it does double damage if they're slowed, but it does, quadruple damage if they are a hard CC, such as a stun, something that the skill itself actually provides. Would probably be a little bit better into actually going through and making it viable. But as it sounds right now, its numbers are good. The numbers are fine. Maybe a little bit of an increase in terms of its survivability, but in actual practical use, because of the way that the crowd control immunity works, as well as in order to use frenzy, you have to use the item. What is it? The Undisputed Champion for the damage increase on Frenzy that also unlocks every rune. Your Frenzy is stunning the enemy, which doesn't trigger your 2-piece set bonus. So it's counterintuitive how everything goes through and works. So there's a couple of mechanical changes that they could go through and make for the Barbarian to help smooth out its gameplay a little bit further and make it at least make a little bit more sense from that gameplay perspective. But for it to actually really fulfill that role of Rift Guardian killer, it needs to be able to do that level of damage without the mob being CC'd. But even with some of the things having even more issues, we go to the Wizard, where you have the Typhon's Veil set, which actually got some buffs recently. And that was... this one is the Hydra set, and so what it does, the 2-piece set bonus, it doubles the duration of Hydras, and then increases the number of heads on your multi-headed Hydra runes by 2, which is essentially everything but Mammoth Hydra. Then you have the damage reduction of 8% for every Hydra head that you have up, and then now it was recently buffed to where your Hydras deal 1200% increased damage for every Hydra head alive instead of just 1000%. But the big thing is that they added an internal cooldown that the Hydra heads cannot die any faster than once every 2 seconds. Where before, if you had a frozen effect on the ground, all of your heads were dead, and so was your wizard, effectively at that rate. Your damage and your damage reduction were neutered based on how quickly you were going through and getting attacked. But even though they upped the damage, they kind of lost a little bit because they also nerfed the Serpent Sparker and the Magistrate, because the issue that they're having on the PTR is that the lawn version, or the LOD version of the Hydra build worked better than Typhon's Veil. So you actually got more damage out of going through and running just a Mammoth Hydra with a lawn build on a wizard. And so what they did is they nerfed the 2 items that buffed Hydra damage and then buffed the set bonus to try and compensate for that, which brought them a bit more in line. The numbers are about there. I think one of the last write-ups that I had read on it was that the lawn build is actually still a little bit better, but Mammoth Hydra has serious performance and lag issues, especially at the playstyles that you have at the higher end when you're grouping up and AoEing down large packs of mobs, just because it's a ground AoE effect, and so it has multiple ticks going on that might be proccing area damage that's going through and then hitting multiple mobs. So it's just a lot of calculations in the background that causes lag, not just in group but also solo play. And that the numbers now are close enough that it might just be better to run Typhon's Veil just from a performance standpoint than it is an actual performance standpoint. So it's, from to say that in a better way, Lawn does more damage, but it wrecks your computer's performance so much that it might be better just to run Typhon's Veil because it's actually doable. Um, and then also, of course, there's still an issue with survivability because if you the way that it's coded, if you take damage, it actually removes the heads from the older of the two, or the newer of the two hydras instead of the older of the two hydras. And so the one that you casted last is the one that it starts removing the heads from. And so in order to get that damage reduction and damage bonus back, you have to cast Hydra twice. And so it's another one of those ones that has some intuitive, like it doesn't feel right. It's not intuitive. That it causes a lot of like mechanical issues with the way that the skills are going through and playing out. And the other thing that some wizards are going through and complaining about is that it is, even though it's not the Bazooka Wizard, it's a very similar style to the Bazooka Wizard because F Sigil or Etched Sigil and the Death Wish are still like two of the big items in all of these wizard builds because you throw out your hydras and then you just start channeling and then you get the huge damage bonus that those two items go through and provide. So it's still a similar type of play style. Throw up a couple spells and then channel until things die. And then the channeling that you're doing isn't actually doing any of the damage. You're just channeling in order to go through and give yourself a damage increase. And so it's one of those things where it's like they don't really have any alternatives to Etched Sigil and the Death Wish that can compete with those numbers. And so it's one of those ones that's more of the same. So instead of casting Meteor, we're just casting Hydras and then running around and channeling Hydra or channeling anything and letting the Hydras go through and do all of the work. And also because of the way that Etched Sigil and Death Wish now work in order to nerf Bazooka, makes it even more counterintuitive because it takes a second for those things to go through and actually start proccing. And so it's something that you're penalized if you stand still, because if you're standing still, you're going to be hit by ranged attacks or ground effects and things of that nature. So you'll lose heads and you'll lose damage. But if you actually want to do competitive damage numbers, you have to stand and channel. And so it's not working out all that well. And the only reason why you'd use the Typhon's Veil is, again, because even though the Mammoth Lawn set is better, just because of technical limitations, it causes terrible performance gameplay wise. And there you have it. You've got like one really awesome set, one set that has some potential, but just because of some mechanical issues, is counterintuitive to play, and it doesn't quite work as well. But if they add slows to the frenzy in stuns, or at least adding stun to the damage bonus, and then maybe something that would make it so that way slow would trigger the double damage as well, and then a little bit increased survivability, you'd have something that could compete with some of the higher end specs. Because as it is right now, it is a better Rift Guardian killer than anything else that the Barbarian has to offer, but it's nowhere near as good as any of the other current Rift Guardian killers that exist at the moment. And then the Wizard, the Lawn set has some potential, but because of the way that Mammoth Hydra works, it probably will be passed for other things. And even though the Typhon's Veil set might have potential, the Witch Doctor set just does that particular job so much better with less of an impact on performance. So that's kind of like where things sit in terms of the PTR. Witch Doctor's also just got a huge buff with the Ring of Emptiness, now only requiring Haunt or Locust Swarm in order to deal its increased damage. Still doesn't buff pets, so Witch Doctor pet builds still are going through and lagging behind. But if you have if you like playing Jade or something along those lines, it will give you a little bit more of a boost for going through and playing that. But yeah, that's the unfortunate state of the PTR at the moment, and just because we the season is ending so soon. I don't think that we're going to get another PTR patch, and so we'll just kind of have to wait and see what the final patch notes look like, and if they address some of these changes. And I think that one is really just going to come down to developer time, not because they're not listening to feedback. Because the developers that they have that are still on Diablo 3, they're very dedicated. They go through lots of feedback. They love going through, hearing from fans. They like actually addressing, from the community's issues and such. But it's all triage. What do they have time to do? What do they have time to implement? Go through, get it implemented into the game, get it tested, get it QA'd, and then ready to ship for a patch. That's really all where it comes down to. And then, of course, going into looking past season 20, season 21, we got 2 class sets the first time, 3 this time. Now there's only the Demon Hunter and the Necromancer left. Would they do both the sets at the same time, or would they do them one off each? Because as we talked about in the last episode, those 2 classes, they've got some issues. They've got some issues going through and staying competitive with a lot of things, especially like the Necromancer numbers. Although, like I was qualifying in the last episode, I think part of the Necromancer is just burnout from playing the class, and that's why its performance is so low. It's probably not quite that bad, but it still is definitely dragging behind everybody else. Yeah. And also, as far as some things go for Diablo, there was another little leak for one of my favorite things to cover, the animated series that is continuing to go through and have rumors and rumors and rumors. And this one actually was found by GameSpot, that there was a LinkedIn profile for Nick Van Dyke, that he is the president of Activision Studios. In his LinkedIn profile, specifically says that he is the executive producer of Diablo, a TV adaptation of Blizzard Entertainment's IP, rendered in anime style. The show is currently in pre-production for distribution worldwide through Netflix. So, even though we pretty much knew, because, the showrunner leaked that he was in talks with Blizzard to go through and do it, we had the trademark claim that was filed for it. Just a whole bunch of other little rumors and tidbits of information and such that have gone through and have circulated through the internet. And then now this one is effectively as good as Blizzard themselves acknowledging it, because, well, Activision acknowledged it and has confirmed that it is in existence and is in pre-production. So I know some other outlets and stuff like that are qualifying and saying, it's not official till it's official. It could still change or it'd still be canceled. At this point, there's not really any going back, I would say. If you're already getting it to the point where you're in pre-production, I think that's pretty much as good as it's gonna get. Because in terms of show development, movie development and stuff, it works a little bit differently from game development. And once you've entered this stage, you've already been greenlit and your budget's already been done. So the money's already been allocated, and now it's just going through and finishing the product. And it also is just one of those things that, thinking more about this series, at least we kind of have a real official confirmation of the show at this point. What is it going to be about? Because that's the next big question. What is it going to be about? When is it going to come out? And I go back to from a couple of years ago, the canceled comic that Blizzard was making in cooperation with Titan Comics. That comic was going to be about the birth of Sanctuary, with a huge focus on Lilith and the birth of the Nephilim. Where now, once we have the Diablo 4 announcement, that particular storyline, it makes a lot of sense why they would be wanting to go through and tell those stories in particular, because it's just a huge tie into Diablo 4. And so that's something that I fully expect that they're going to be going through and doing with this particular series, is that it's going to be about Lilith, it's going to be about the birth of Sanctuary and the Nephilim, hopefully it's going to be one of those ones that will finally stop all of those Reddit and forum posts about people saying, well, is Lilith really the bad guy? I mean, she's our mother and all that. Yes, she is the bad guy. She is evil. She's dag nasty evil. It's just a fact. She is not going to help us. She does not care for us. She does not love us. I know this is like the 10th time I've ranted about this. Lilith will, more sooner kill all of the Nephilim than show them any kind of love and affection. So there you have it. And if they do go forward, with this particular storyline, we'll finally go through and get to see that she's not a nice person, and that she's not going to be the good guy. And then the one last thing that I wanted to go through and touch on as far as forward facing Diablo news is another one that I see popping up a lot on Reddit and the forums and such. Is people are just getting really, really antsy for that quarterly update for Diablo 4. And Nevelistus did go through and say that she would like it to be at least in the second third of the quarter, as far as the update, when they go through and they publish the updates. But there's so much that goes into it that it's too hard to promise. And now everyone is just going crazy over asking, oh, we're almost at the end of February, where's the quarterly update? Where's the quarterly update? Like, the quarter's almost over, guys. Yeah, we still have almost half the quarter to go, but people are just, it's a new Reddit thread that pops up all the time. And it's just it's ready when it's ready. They've got until the end of March in order to go through and post that quarterly update. I do hope, since they're going to be putting a lot of time and effort into it, I imagine that part of it is also just they're so early in the development of Diablo 4 that they really have to develop something concrete to talk about, before they go through and post it. But I'm hoping that we do get to see, if they do it like the multi-part series that they had after BlizzCon, that would be cool, where it's not just like one blog, where it's going to be like a short series of blogs, or even just like video updates or anything along those lines, or a developer interview going through and talking about it. That would be cool. Something a bit meaty or substantial to go through and talk about. And there was one other thing that Wolcen went through and sent in an email, that we have a little bit of a change for the way things work in Diablo 3. And that is just, doesn't really affect performance or anything along those lines. It's that on the Diablo3.com, so the external site, they are going to be removing historical data for rankings for the seasons in the eras. So that way, you'll only be able to see the past 5 seasons instead of the past 10 seasons, just to go through and help improve performance on the web server. You still can go back and see the historical data as it was if you log into the game, but it's just one of those things that it went into effect today. And just to help try and boost web performance. And I know that I was going through, and when I was trying to find just some information for the leaderboards the other day, that it was down. So they've been doing maintenance on the leaderboards for the last couple of days, for the Diablo 3 website. It looks like they finally went through and did it. And then also the website leaderboards will only update every 15 minutes as opposed to every 5 minutes. So not really something that affects the vast majority of the user base, but hopefully it will, it will lead to the performance increases that they were looking for. And then, as I went through and talked about at the beginning of the show, we've got the launch of Wolcen that went through and happened last Friday for Valentine's Day, and or actually I guess it launched, what was it, Thursday night or Friday morning? I forget which one that it was. It was Thursday night the game launched on the 13th, and it had some issues. There was some definite issues, and it's something that we've kind of, as Diablo fans, we've all heard before. There was not enough infrastructure, and there's databases being overrun, and they had to work with their vendors and stuff like that in order to spin up new servers, and then they still had continual database errors and such, and it was a rough launch. It was definitely a rough launch, so that's one of those things that is just when you had a game, especially one that's been in development for like what it's been close to 5 years now, that people have been seeing like the prolonged beta and developer updates and such. I know Riker has been covering this one ever since its inception. That it made sense that it had a certain level of popularity, and I think it peaked at around like 70,000 players in the game before eventually going through and crashing. It missed a lot of the launch weekend, at least for the online mode, while they had the game servers down to address database errors. And it still had a couple of performance issues. There's still some problems with sound, pet performance, and things along those lines. And then the UI itself, I'm only like 6 hours into the game, but the UI has some problems. You don't really have clear indicators for any buffs that are affecting your characters. You don't see pet damage numbers or the pet health or anything along those lines. So there's definitely a lot of things that they have to go through and improve, but they've already announced they're going to be patching the game soon. And with so many people going through and playing, I'm sure that it is at least popular enough that they are going to be able to dedicate a lot of time and effort into going through and improving it, because this is just the starting point. This isn't the final game that we have to go through and do. And it has some interesting takes on in-game progression and such. It's a little bit different from even what Path of Exile does. I don't want to talk about that too much because, like I said, I'm not that far into the game. I haven't experienced it myself, and I don't just want to regurgitate things that other people are going through and saying about the end game. But it definitely looks interesting. It's got a lot of promise. I really like the way that they did the skill system. But it's really funny that you have it's just another ARPG that has a really rough launch, because I think that they probably didn't accurately guess how many people would be, just itching for this game. And I think Steven and I went through and talked about it, that it was, this is like the year of ARPGs, and just the fact that they announced Diablo 4 is just going to add a certain level of hype to anything that comes out, because people are going to want to try. It's like, well, I'm waiting for Diablo 4, but I'll play this other ARPG in the meantime, or I'll play this other ARPG in the meantime. There's a lot of things that they've wanted to go through and just, try different games. And just the grindy nature of ARPGs, you might enjoy the game through the story in the beginning of the end game, but then when it gets to like the grind aspect of it, it might lose you there, and so you look to go through and play something else. A lot of people will go and they'll hop back and forth between PoE leagues and Diablo seasons because it gives them that rush of progression, and then once it gets to the point where it's grindy, they can just go to something else. This is just another game in the library for people to go through and check out. But its launch, as troubled as it was, I think really is a testament to just how popular the ARPG genre is, and just kind of how underutilized it is. In that, we just enjoy this style of game, and we want to see the whole genre thrive, so that way we have more games instead of it just like you just always hear Diablo and Path of Exile, and then you have Grim Dawn and others kind of sitting down below it, that we might have more bigger games coming out. We'll have we'll have 3 seasons to go and play through as opposed to just 2. But it is definitely, I think, just a hallmark of just how hungry people are for the next new thing, and where once we get closer and closer to that Diablo 4 launch, things are going to get really exciting. And then also it's something different. It has an even different take on the way that skills work. It has a good middle ground, I think, in between Path of Exile and like Diablo 2. More so than Diablo 3 in terms of the talent tree progression, since Diablo 3 doesn't have a talent tree. where it's a little bit more user friendly, I think, than the Path of Exile one is. It's a bit more, it's a bit easier to go through and make sense of and make decisions. So there's still a lot there to, screw up and mess with your character progression if you go a little bit further down the wrong way, or if you're like me and you read some of the talents wrong. Um, because some of the wording, it's a new ARPG, so the way that they word things, the way that skills work, is different from my main game Diablo, and so some of it I have to go over quite a few times, or actually like talent into it and test out and see that, oh, that's 30% damage on the next attack, as in your your basic attack, not 30% on your next like spell. Okay, I was getting a little bit too over ambitious on that one, so I had to go through and respec, only once in order to go through and do it. But I'm trying to stay away from any build guides at the moment and just try and make my way through. And I of course was drawn straight to the Plaguebringer tree on the outer ring, because it's all about pets, and I like my Lagromancer, my Fishymancer, and such. So I was initially drawn to that one. But pets kind of suck in this game. They don't do. I can't really tell how much damage they do in general, and they die in just a couple hits. So at least playing out my dreams of being a poison necromancer, that's at least being fun. Um, and it's yeah, it's just something new, something different to try out. We'll see how it goes. I've been enjoying the game so far. The story has some reminiscence of some very Diablo-esque things, though with a twist. So it is. I definitely would recommend it if you're just going through and looking for something new. It's worth a pickup in order to go and try out. I know people have powered through the campaign and are like grinding into the end game already. I'm just slowly going through, taking my time. I can't wait to go through and get to the Act 1 boss that everyone says is just like absolutely hellish. That should be fun. Because it's been a while since you've had something that might be mechanically difficult as far as ARPG goes. You don't really have that too much in Diablo, where it's all about numbers and scaling and such, and not too much into the mechanical issues like what fighting Duriel for the first time was in Diablo 2. Um, yeah, but I'll definitely be going through, continuing to go and play that. Hopefully, I'll have some time this weekend. I had set some time up this last weekend to go through and play it, but of course the servers were down, and that reminds me of another point: offline mode. So you would think, because the game offers online and offline mode, that since the online servers were down, people could just go through and play their offline characters. But it didn't really seem to help all that much, because there's still tons and tons and tons of complaints about the game going through being down and unplayable. Some people took advantage of the offline play, especially those that might be just like your solo self-found players and such. They just like going through playing solo and such. And even though I'm only playing the game through solo at the moment, I wanted to make an online character because I've got a couple of friends that were interested in the game, saw how bad the launch was, and now they've decided to hold off on getting the purchase for at least another month or so, especially with like some of the DLC that's coming out from Monster Hunter. They're big Monster Hunter players. And that they want to give it some time, and they'll jump in later. And if I want to like be able to, I don't even know what power leveling would be like in this particular game, but to also just go through and play with them, it would have to be online. And so even though it offered the offline mode, which is something that a lot of people criticized Blizzard, back with Diablo 3 and the Era 37 launch, of not having that offline mode, we can see that we have a modern ARPG that offered an offline mode, but people didn't care. The majority of players still wanted to go through and do that online mode, and the offline mode was kind of pushed to the side. Or maybe some people played it for a little bit just to get by until online went through and came back. And so I guess that was just one of those ones where it does kind of go through and show that maybe the online only games kind of have a point, that's what the majority of the user base wants. I do think that there was a lot of at least a lot of more understanding, from the player base. There were a lot of people that, a lot more people than what I ever saw with Blizzard's launch of the Diablo 3, being more sympathetic to the developers of Wolcen, with understanding that not everything can go right, and you run into a lot of unknown issues once you actually launch the game, especially for something that was way more popular than they ever expected. They didn't have the server or the database space in order to keep up with it, and that they were responding as quickly as they could. To go through and give updates and ETAs and when the game would be back up and address those issues. But despite that group of people that remained positive, it still was kind of like an overwhelming, well, I'm never going to play this game again and blah blah blah. Which I hope if they bought the game that they would actually go through and give it a try. But it is, it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't. You put the offline mode in, and people will still complain and want a refund for the game. I wouldn't be surprised if some of those same people are the ones that criticized Blizzard 8 years ago, saying, well, if you had an offline mode, we could still go through and play. And, well, there you have it. For me myself, it was just like one of those ones. I was bummed that I couldn't go through and play the game because I had time over the weekend in order to play it. But I just went back. I played a little bit of Diablo. I played some Heroes, played some Hearthstone, and that was about it. I just played something else. It's just not as worthwhile going through and getting upset and angry. We'll see if I can go through and maintain that level of mind once Diablo 4 comes out. Hope and pray that there's no reiteration of Area 37 on that launch, and that they overestimate the numbers, because it's going to be big, it's going to be popular. But yeah, that's pretty much it. And that will kind of bring me to a close on this particular episode as I go through. I'll continue to go and be playing some Wolcen. I hope at least to be able to get through the game before we have the Season 20 launch, because that one is going to be a lot of fun. I do plan on playing a Witch Doctor. That set looks like a lot of fun, and it's going to be really powerful, which is always a plus, with my limited playtime, that having any bonuses that I can, or any handicaps that I can for getting the season done will definitely be a bonus for me. And man, I'm really excited. I'm already excited for Season 21, but it also sucks if they're going to be doing both the Demon Hunter and the Necromancer in the same season, potentially. That I don't know how I'll divide my time, because those are my two favorite classes. But we'll see. But yeah, if you have any questions, comments, you see any news that you have lying around, which again, thank you for that part about the leaderboards there, Watson. Send me an email, westmarchworkshop@blizzpro.com. Again, that's westmarchworkshop@blizzpro.com. Or you can follow the show at the WM Workshop, to go through and see tweets when we're going to go through and being live and what days that we're recording on, because the next episode is going to be delayed. Just spoilers ahead of time. I won't be able to record on March 4th, and I'm not quite sure if I'm able to record on March 5th. So it might be a recording done on March 3rd. But yeah, just keep your eye on Twitter for an update on when I'll be able to record the next episode live. And you can find that, of course, every other week on twitch.tv/BlizzPro at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. And then, of course, you can always go through, check out, things I talk about on the show over at diablo.blizzpro.com, or you can find the articles that I write over on diablofans.com. We are also in-game on the BlizzPro clan or the Westmarch Workshop community. And then you can also follow me individually. I'm at 9ballgamer on Twitter or twitch.tv/9ball. And with that, I thank you for going through and joining me here tonight, or listening to the episode at home. And I'll bid you all a good evening and happy slaying of all those demons, with whatever game it is that you're playing. And we'll catch you next time.